Welcome to the Kansas City Reign off-season recap video. This video was taken from clips from the live stream over on my main channel, but I wanted to give an abbreviated version of the off-season, focusing solely on what happened to the Reign. And unfortunately, the off-season did start with the Reign falling all the way from 7 down to 10 in the lottery. Of course, that led to me creating a poll for y'all to vote on the top 10 players in the draft that you would like to take, as well as what would be the preference in terms of staying at 10, trading up, or trading down. And from this voting, I gathered that there was really a top 7 that the subscribers were interested in. Yes, of course, we made a top 10 in case things went poorly, but there was a top 7, and the goal was to stay at 10 and hope one of those top 7 fell. So thus we got into the draft, and the first pick was pretty chalk, but then the Philadelphia 76ers went off the board, taking Alton Dawkins at number 2, and that opened up a trade opportunity for the Venom to make an aggressive trade up for Ken Nixon, who was the second best player in this draft class. And now that one of the expansion teams had taken their pick, it was time to focus in on the Reign now. And again, their goal here was to have, Man never really had a chance to make it to 10, but if one of Lewis Miller, Rock Dragic, or Dale Theus could make it to 10, that would be the goal. And if they were all off the board in the first 9 picks, then the Reign would have made a trade up to take one of those players. You can, of course, trade for a player after he's been drafted in 2K, so that would have been the goal. The first of these players to come off the board would be number 5 overall, with Dale Theus going to the Houston Rockets, another insane defender going there. And then Lewis Miller, who was probably the biggest hope, as he was the 5th rated prospect on the board. He ends up going to the New Orleans Pelicans. They draft a point guard for the 2nd straight year. After that 6th pick, though, the next couple of selections off the board from the Jazz, the Hornets, and then the Suns went about as well as the Reign could have hoped, as the player ranked 6th on the board for the Kansas City Reign remained available, and that was Rock Dragic, one of the few players in this class with a listed ceiling of Hall of Fame compared to Pistol Pete Maravich. Dragic was more of a long-term project for sure, as he was projected to be a 70 overall, but starting with 2 badges as a 70 overall is certainly a solid starting point. 6'5", 224 pounds, so he's a pretty well-built dude. He's stocky. No significant weaknesses, again, despite being 70 overall. And so really the only downside is the combination of a 70 overall start with the 22 years of age. The grades for a 70 overall look really solid on Dragic, and so the Reign end up with a player here at pick 10 that could certainly, I think it is in a decent probability range of outcomes that Dragic ends up being one of the top 5 best players from this class. So to get him at 10 could certainly be considered one of, if not the steal of the draft. You just have to hope that he actually hits on that upside. He has a long way to go to reach it, but if he does, easily gonna be a steal of the draft for the Kansas City Reign, going with a Slovenian to start their rebuild through the draft. In the 2nd round, it took some voting, but ultimately it was decided that the 7-foot big man out of Michigan with sweet hair, Cedric Meeks, who had one of the best upsides remaining in the draft, only a 67 overall though, so likely a G Leaguer to start, but not a bad pickup with a guy with an all-star ceiling here in the 2nd round. Taking a look at what Rock Dragic had once the draft was all said and done. Like I said, he does start with those 2 badges. The grades looked pretty much exactly what they were projected to be. Good 3-point shooter, good inside scorer, good perimeter defender, pretty good athlete, and then that A potential. If you look both at that rating and the comparison bar on the right-hand side, which is a more accurate measure of what a player's potential is going to be. But both of those say that Dragic looks to be a very high impact starter in the future. All-star, superstar, and certainly a guy that you can be excited about building around in the future. And even despite that low overall, I think these grades mean that he can take on a decent amount of minutes in his rookie season. Cedric Meeks here, 67 overall. Even though the rating says C, it looks like he has more league average position for his position in terms of potential. So certainly a guy that could be either a really good sixth man or maybe even a low-end starter should the team decide to move off of Jalen Duren at any point. So with the draft over, it was time to get to free agency, and the team wanted to get a good mentor for Dragic, and that ends up being Seth Curry, who should be able to teach him how to shoot quite well. After that, it was time to take on some bigger contracts for some of their own players, starting with Jalen Duren, the number 1 pick in the expansion draft, and easily need to get him locked up. That's 4 years starting at $28 million. So big payday for Jalen Duren. That's just how it goes in this game. I'm not sure he's going to get that much money in real life, if I'm being honest, but he might. Good young center for sure in this league. Next up was Jovic, another very high draft pick in the expansion draft. Colin Sexton played very well for this team, so they're going to bring him back on a flat $15 million for the next 3 seasons. Nikola Vucevic also brought back for 2 seasons at $10 million flat for each year to provide some mentorship and potentially a trade asset down the road. Duncan Robinson was also brought in to mentor Bryce Sensabaugh and try to get who was already a good shooter even better. With free agency wrapped up, it was time to get to the player progression screen. And the first season's player progression is probably the least exciting because, of course, none of the rookies that you drafted are going to progress. But going forward, of course, we'll be getting guys like Dragic and Meeks progressed in future seasons. We did get a pretty solid boost for Jalen Duren here. Vooch, despite being 35 years old, only went down 1. Bryce Sensabaugh, probably the biggest riser of the young guys, +3 for him at now age 22. Exciting to see what Bryce can do. He is going to be a restricted free agent after this season. Strus going up. We actually had to release Strus because we were over the roster limit. He was ineligible to play for the Reign anyway because he was acquired via trade, not via a draft. Max Christie only goes up 2 overall, but starting at a 75 +2 up to 77, still good. These guys are definitely solid NBA contributors at this point, including Rollins, who has silver set shot specialist and a total of 5 badges. Probably the biggest disappointment of this screen was Nikola Jovic only going up by 1 overall. Picked so highly in the expansion draft, only to go up 1 overall is a little bit disappointing. Probably alongside him, the second most disappointing was Ryan Rupert, only going up 2. He's the other player that ended up actually getting released. I think the lack of development from him this offseason made him the most expendable player on the team. And then the biggest riser was Janai Broom going into his second season, the big man taken from the 76ers. And that is going to wrap us up here for this Kansas City Reign offseason. We'll be playing against the Venom in the first game of the season. So that's going to be fun, and it will be on the main channel rather than on this channel, that game. So watch out for that. But that's all I've got for this offseason. Hope you enjoyed it. Drop a like on the video if you did. And I'll be back soon. Go Reign.